Welcome to the Quiet Warrior Show, where we help top leaders find their pathway to incredible success and a lifetime of happiness. Here is your host, Tom Dutta, the Quiet Warrior.
All right. My name is Tom, and I'm the host of the Quiet Warrior Show. We're live streaming today. I have a very special guest on, and I'm excited for two reasons. She is a Canadian or lives in Canada. We'll learn more, and it's my birthday. And it's such a pleasure to be doing this on my birthday. Listen, I want to tell everybody what live streaming is. If you haven't seen a live stream before, we're live across LinkedIn, Facebook, and YouTube. What does that mean? Well, you get to peek into the studio as we're taping this epic interview. All the bloopers and all will be there for you to enjoy. You can also interact with the host with the chat box. What I'd like you to do is consider subscribing to the Tom Dutta YouTube channel. Just click the button that's below. That way, when we release the podcast and the second show, which will be a YouTube premiere video, you'll be able to get early notification. If you're just listening to podcasts, well, you can find the Quiet Warrior Show wherever you get your podcasts. So it's a pleasure to have on the show today, Nina PUREWAL. Nina, welcome.
Thanks so much, Tom, for having me, and happy birthday.
Thank you. I'm glad nobody was going to sing to me today. I already had that happen. I want to tell everybody a little bit about your background, just so we know the depth behind you. You're a great thought leader. There's a stock ticker on the screen. There's a few words there. You're the founder of Pure Minds. It's a social enterprise focused on wellness. You're a best-selling author. And the book title, I want to say it so badly, but I'm going to tease the audience and let you say it in a minute. Also, you've got an interesting story. You spent most of your career as in sales and marketing in corporate America, and then you made a big shift. So welcome to the show. You know, we're going to put the spotlight on you today and really get into your story. So take us back to where it all began. I know that you had this career, but there were some very challenging things early in your life that really, I say, didn't define you. They shaped you because you did something epic with them to help others. So why don't you take us back there?
Yeah, thank you so much for that great introduction. And that's true. My mindfulness and meditation ancient wisdom journey started over 20 years ago. It's actually not the greatest story. I was 16 at the time, and I unexpectedly lost my dad and brother very tragically, very suddenly. And I started to just question what life was all about. What's our purpose in life? What's the meaning in life? And so that's when I really started to study ancient wisdom, and I got into mindfulness and meditation. And, from there, I tried to live as normal of a life as I possibly could. I went to business school, and I had a great career, as you said, in sales and marketing, actually in Canada, not America. At times I did report into the States, but mostly in Canada. And in 2010, I kind of hit a peak point of stress, sparked by the corporate grind, very similar to your path as well. And I knew I needed to do something drastic. So I sold my home, I left my career, and I went to Northern California, and I lived in an ashram for a year, or a monastery. And that's where I really studied mindfulness and meditation. Came back, worked in corporate for a bit, and started my business a few years later.
Well, first of all, my mind is going on a journey, Nina, everywhere. Now, were you born in Canada? Or
I was, yeah, born and raised.
And you're right now, you live in,
I'm just north of Toronto.
Okay, fantastic. And of course, I'm on the other side of the world here in Canada, in British Columbia. I'm sure, we both have been impacted by this heat wave as well that we just had. First, I want to honor you. It's I know you go on online a lot and you tell your story of vulnerability. Sorry for your loss. Nobody can put themselves in your shoes. I don't want to get into too much to dig up the past and pain. You lost your dad and your brother. How old were you, and how old were they, and what happened? Can you talk about it?
Yeah, definitely. And I'm happy to talk about. I've gone through a lot of therapy. I'm still in therapy. I think therapy is incredible. But I'm happy to talk about it because I feel like if I share my story and I give someone 1% of hope that they can find happiness and peace through adversity, then it's totally worth it. So I was 16 at the time. My parents were going through a marital discord. My mom was very unhappy. My dad was quite abusive throughout their marriage. So she suddenly, after 22 years of marriage, served him with divorce papers, and it shocked him because he always had control over her.
Yeah.
And so, long story short, 6 months after that event, my parents were mid-40s. My brother was 10. I was 16. My mom and I came home from an appointment. Our neighbors were kind of running up to us as we pulled in the driveway to tell us that our whole house was on fire. And from there, my dad basically took my brother's life and committed suicide. And all the detectives on the case told me that his plan, because it was premeditated, was actually to take me as well and leave my mom with nothing. So it was really by a stroke of luck, which I talk about in the book, that, you know, I was with my mom at the time. She was supposed to be in a meeting until 10 o'clock that night. But our meeting got canceled and she came home early and took me to an appointment. So it was all, you know, I'm very, very grateful to be here, let's just say. And, you know, that was definitely one of the most challenging times of my life.
Oh my goodness. Well, we're going to get you to hold up the book in just a minute. But first of all, you say shocked. I mean, just hearing your story, I'm shocked. You hear stories like this secondhand, and it's one thing, and another one to sit and look directly at somebody who's gone through it. My heart is just growing for you and your courage. I also am very impressed and honored with the fact that you will say publicly you're in therapy. I have had a journey in my own life, and I believe that every business leader, every person should have a care team for a preventive and taking care of, you know, get a checkup from the neck up, I call it.
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, why it's great to have a mastermind partner who's a psychiatrist or a psychologist and other people who can help you, you know, with the way your brain works. Your brother, what was his name?
VJ.
VJ?
Yeah.
Wonderful. And so do you have any other siblings now, or just you?
No, I don't. It was just us two. So just me. My mom and I obviously became incredibly close. You know, since the incident, she was my best friend, but I lost her 6 years ago to Lou Gehrig's. So
I'm sorry.
It's been a tough journey. It's been, and I know you've had it tough too. I've listened to, you know, your podcasts and, you know, read quite a few things about you, and it's honorable to just be with you as well. It's incredible what you have overcome too, and it's amazing. I love what you said in the beginning. You know, these shape us. They don't define us, but they shape us.
Yeah. Well, just know that from now on, we're connected by life. I think you and I met. God put you in my path for a reason, and I want to keep the spotlight on you today. But what's interesting about my show is when I have people on and they tell their story, it unlocks something in me, and I reply with a story. And I think that's the thing I admire the most about you, is when you tell your story, there are going to be people listening to this now and in the future, and it's a legacy you're doing here that will unlock something in them, you know, something that will say, you know, I'm not alone, or I got to read her book. I've got to follow her so I can get through what I went through. I want to tell you something, and it's funny, the tragic story with the home on fire. I went to school in a area called North Delta, and it was on the border of Surrey, British Columbia, and Delta. And, you know, it's typical immigrants. My father was pumped gas. He came from Fiji with my mom, and then became a journeyman apprentice electrician. And we lived in this neighborhood where I used to walk to school every day up this big hill. Of course, I played the tuba. I picked the biggest, heaviest instrument in school.
Good one. I played the flute, so I didn't have that problem.
All right. Well, you had more grace than I did. I mean, I was a chubby kid too, so I went through all that stuff. But I would walk, and I would always turn the corner and walk the final leg to school. And there was this house at the corner. I never even thought about it. And one day I was walking to school, and it had police tape, and the house was all charred. Mm-hmm. And it was a similar story. It was a father, and it's funny, he used to drive a big truck with a gasoline tank on the back. So I think he had an excavating business. And me and my friends were kind of butt heads. We used to throw rocks when he was driving and try and hit the gas thing on it, just so it go clink, clank. And he would go like this to us. But he basically set his house on fire, and everybody perished, including the wife. Two of the children escaped, and there was actually a stream of blood across the road, and they went to a neighbor's house, and that haunted me for a long time. And
Yes.
what I didn't realize is how in my unconscious mind those memories and thoughts are wired into my thinking patterns. And I'll
Yes.
finish with this, and then you can teach us that yes, my father was a pretty good guy, but a violent drunk when he was at home. My mom and dad divorced when I was 12, became homeless, and all that. Uh, I'm so grateful that I had parents who did the best with what they had. And after hearing your story, I'm never going to complain again about how tough my life was. So it's amazing to me. Tell us about that. I think it's the coolest thing that you took a turn and went to LA and lived in an ashram. I mean, first of
Yeah.
all, how did you do that? What did you experience? Why LA? Come on, tell us.
You know what? My mom actually, she was also working in corporate. And so she called me one day. We used to talk every day on the way to work. And she said, hey, there's this course in Northern California in the Redwoods. It's a 1-year course on ancient spiritual philosophy, which is Vedanta, what she studied. And she said, I'm going to take a year off. Even though she was 1 year to retirement, she said, I'm going. And thank God she did, because she got sick after she came back. And something in my gut, Tom, even though had a great career, I was climbing the corporate ladder, something in my gut was like, you have to go. Like, this is it. You have to go. I had just gotten married, so of course I had to talk to my partner about it. And, he said, he got into ancient wisdom as well after he met me. And he said, you know what, let's do it. Let's go. It's now or never. And so we sold our dream home that we just bought. He was also in corporate marketing and sales. And it's hard to explain what drove me other than a knowing, just a really strong gut feeling. And I'm so grateful I did it. We were in the middle of an economic crisis. So many people thought we were totally crazy. And back then, mindfulness and meditation wasn't really what it is now. But honestly, it was the best decision that I made, even though it had its fair share of risks, because it laid the foundation of what I do today. And as much as I loved my career in sales and marketing, I always felt that there was a different purpose for me. And I think what that course enabled me to do was to get some foundation to then be able to, spread this knowledge.
Yeah, that's amazing to me. We'll have to get that in the show notes, just the detail about that place, if it's still there. And it's interesting because in the hero's journey, which is part of the narrative of this show, Joe Campbell, his work that he left us, they talk about this call to adventure. And I believe it's even a higher purpose. I'm a faith-based man, and I believe that God puts you in situations in your life to go out and do something with the story to help others. In fact, I don't believe that people who are doing things with their stories, do it for themselves. Usually it's for someone who's broken or somebody who's stuck. And so the ashram experience is pretty cool. It's funny you said there's this burning or this deep thing in your gut. That's exactly hero's journey. And, Nina, I'm sure you'd like to know what you think of this, but they say that less than 5% of people answer that call that they have in their gut. They just continue on the corporate grind, and they're stressed out and unhappy instead of going and seeking. You're a seeker, and you came back as a guide, as somebody of wisdom. So hold up the book there. It's called, and tell us the title.
It's called Let That Shit Go, because we hold on to so much stuff. And, ancient wisdom talks about how our true nature is joy, it's bliss, it's peace, it's love, it's all these wonderful things. But what's happened over time, if you think of yourself as a child, you were inherently happy. You cried for very practical reasons. If you were tired, you were hungry, but you were inherently happy. If you hang around with a toddler, you'll realize they're inherently happy. But what happened over time? What happened as we got into teenagehood, as we got into adulthood, is we built up all this shit along the way of us accessing that happiness. It's always there for us to lean into, but we just have so much stuff in the way. So letting shit go is not an easy process. I will preface with that. It's a very difficult thing to do, to bring stuff up that might be sitting dormant, but it holds us back. It holds us back, not just from experiencing that inner peace, but from being our best selves.
Yeah, it's pretty amazing. I love the title of the book, and I'm glad you said it. And it's going to be one that I will feature in the notes of the show. Everybody, I'm just going to do a shout out. Authors love reviews. In fact, that's how we get known in the world. And
Yes,
so you
thank
want to get,
you.
yeah, please get that book. Let that blank go. And I'd like you to read it cover to cover, and then go on Amazon, Goodreads.com, give Nina a great review, and then tell somebody about that book. By the way, the title, was that easy to come up with? Because it's a great title.
Thanks. It was actually, so the book is filled with 120 tips on how to let stuff go. So it's very easy to read. You can read a page or two and feel accomplished at the end of the day. So when we submitted the proposal, it was one of the tips, and our publisher said, you know what, let's just make this the name of the book. It's so catchy and it's so appealing. Like, so many people are holding on to stuff, right? So it's appealing to the masses.
Yeah. I'm kind of smiling because my mind went on a journey in my head again. I had a guest on a short while ago, and her publisher wouldn't let her use that word, so she came up with the word shiitake.
There you go. There's ways around it, right?
And it fit too. Well, I got to tell you, you're talking to a guy who's had a lot of shit in his life and had to let it go. Sadly, I didn't have a mentor like you in my life to learn from until I decided maybe 10 years ago to start unraveling why I was tearing down my own success. And on the outside, like you, looked great, successful, but on the inside, there were these demons and monsters.
Yes.
And this really, I think you might have known about my recent TED Talk. I revealed that I fell in a bathtub 3 years ago and cracked my head, got serious concussion, and then went into depression, and all sorts of really tough things started happening. And I'm still recovering. I have double vision and challenged with some things. But it was through that I was forced to really ask myself why. And there was still this feeling of unworthiness inside. And my dad passed away January 2018. And I guess I didn't realize the depth until I went through my cognitive behavioral therapy, which is where they sent me, that how the stuff you talk about is actually wired in your thought patterns, and you can't get rid of it, right? You have to do things. So what fascinates me and why I was interested in your story is because you're a teacher, is a couple things. One was meditation, and the other one is mindfulness. They used to be just buzzwords. I know some people kind of look up like, oh yeah, okay, here we go again, mindfulness.
Yeah.
But I have a good understanding of it, but I want to hear from you to tell us what is meditation, and what's behind it, what's the benefit, and then this thing called mindfulness. Help us with that.
Yeah, definitely. So mindfulness is really the art of being fully present, because we are constantly distracted. We think on average 60,000 thoughts a day, which translates to 35 to 42 thoughts a minute.
Wow.
And studies show that we're only aware of less than 1% of our thoughts. So much stuff is happening subconsciously. And this is what you talk about, the subconscious mind and how we hold on to things we don't even realize. And, they're sitting suppressed, and we don't even know we get a little tummy ache, or our palms get sweaty, our heart races, and we suddenly tap into our mind and go, oh my gosh, I was just thinking about that. We don't even realize it. And so mindfulness is really all about being in the here and now. But the process of it is becoming more and more aware of your mind, because our mind takes us into all these different places. It's not our fault. It's just the way that we're wired. And like you said, so many things that happen in childhood, all of those records we play, they continue on in, teenagehood, in adulthood. And a lot of them, actually, studies say that 80% of our thoughts are negative or self-deprecating. So all the more reason to understand and have awareness of what's going on in there. So that's what mindfulness does. Mindfulness essentially makes you aware of what's happening in your mind and gives you the ability to pull back and be in the here and now. Meditation is, I say, like going to the gym for your mind. So if mindfulness is something you're practicing in the day-to-day, when you're sitting in meditation, it's almost like you're at the gym. Like, how much time do we spend on our bodies, right? What we wear, the makeup, our hair, what we eat, diet, nutrition, yoga. How often are we tapping into what's going on up here consciously? So that's what meditation does. When you sit in meditation, yes, it's very peaceful. Yes, it's very quiet, but you also become aware, acutely aware of where your mind goes, because the thoughts don't suddenly stop in meditation and you don't suddenly get silence. It's your mind is still thinking thoughts, but you become very aware of them. And that's when you can start moving through, becoming aware of the patterns, and then start moving through them and shifting them, creating new neural networks.
Yeah, you did such a good job, everybody. These are teaching moments on the show. We just talked about mindfulness and meditation. Come back and re-listen to this, make some notes, take a look at that. I teach this in the work I do as well. And it's interesting because I believe that if you really get to know most successful people who run business or leaders, they have learned meditation, and whether it's a 30-second or 1 minute, but I've been teaching some, and they usually get hung up and they say, geez, I sat and I tried to do it and it didn't work for me. It really is a habit you have to develop, right?
Yes.
And it's not easy, but everybody, I'm just going to say to honor Nina, she explained it much better than I do. When I first did meditation, I used an online app and it guided me. But when I got into that space where I could become grounded and like a mountain, and the weather, I guess, around the mountain, those are my thoughts, and I could step back, something amazing started happening. It was a completely different place I was in. I've never felt anything like it. And in fact, a meditative state, almost felt like I went into a deep sleep as well.
Yeah.
And tell us, when do you think the best time of the day is to meditate?
Yeah, for me personally, I always say meditation is personal. There's so many different types of meditations you can do, but for me, I find morning is the best. And even when we were at the ashram, meditation was the first thing we did at 6 o'clock in the morning every day. I had a monk that once said, meditate before you enter the world, which means before you pick up your phone, before you have a conversation, before you do anything, worldly, because when you wake up, your mind is kind of fresh, it's clear. You don't already have, when you get to the 2 o'clock work slump, you're already exhausted from so much. Well, in the morning, you're fresh, right? And so for me, I find that is the best time to meditate. When I first wake up, sometimes I just sit up in my bed and I go. I find that most effective.
Yeah, that's my routine, which I've been doing for 10 years, is writing 3 gratitudes and a couple other things I do, plus the meditation. And when I was paid executive working for other companies, I started using it to calm down things like anxiety, because many leaders will never say, but they have stress, and stress becomes distress. Pretty fantastic. I was reading some things about brain waves, and apparently there's 5 different brain waves. So the science behind this meditation is pretty amazing. You're basically slowing everything down. Almost when do you have children or
I do. I have a 6-year-old. Yeah.
Oh, fantastic. Well, here's an interesting thing. I've been doing a side hustle. I had to get past my ego to be able to say this publicly, but I've been waiting tables at a restaurant because of my brain injury and my recovery. And I see people come in, this next generation, and they bring their kids, and this is what you see. You see mom and dad getting their beer and their burger. As soon as they put the kid at the table, let's say they're 4 years old, they put a little screen, a device, and the kid's staring at it and watching, these kid shows, and I mean, there's all this stuff going around, happening around this child, and the child's not even blinking. They're not even aware. And I started thinking about things like ADHD and how that one thing that you're teaching your child, you're teaching them, first of all, not to be mindful. You're teaching them not to be able to communicate. You lose that. They're not talking. But looking at a screen like that's got to do something that's not healthy for the brain. Do you have any comment on that?
Yeah, every parents differently and has a different style and different stress level. With my daughter, I started implementing mindfulness and meditation since she was 2. And we actually have like a little calming center in our house. And we actually put it there when the pandemic hit, because even kids feel it, right? And so in that calming center, we have a breathing ball, we have glitter jars, which are calming jars, we have essential oils, and I have tons of books. There's so many good resources, kids' books on mindfulness meditation, flashcards. So anytime she's kind of feeling it, let's go to the calming center. Let's take a couple of breaths. And now she tells me, she's like, Mom, you look stressed. You need to go to the calming center. But yeah, it's so, often, when I speak to her, I'm like, I wish I had these self-regulation tools as a tween or a teenager, because I didn't know what to do with all the emotion that came up. I displaced it and got into all kinds of things. But I try to make her very aware of her thoughts, even when she goes to bed at night and, oh, I'm scared. I feel like maybe you and daddy are going to leave me. That's your mind. That's your mind. That's not your rational part of your brain. That's your mind thinking all these thoughts. So I try to make her aware at this age. So I think any type of technique, and there's so many out there that a parent can implement, or a guardian can implement with their kids at as young as 1 or 2, just to help them regulate their own emotions, is a really, really powerful gift that you're giving your child.
I think that's pretty cool. I'm going to ask you to take a picture of that room and just send it to me, maybe offline. I'd love to see that. It's interesting because we have so much alike in our thinking. I had this vision that companies of the future would have these type of rooms, and you would have cubbies where everybody could keep their journal and the nice chair and the headset. In your book, Nina PUREWAL, we're talking to her about a book, Let That Shit Go, 120 tips in there. She's an author and the founder of Pure Minds. Nina, the book itself, does it have these concepts you're talking about in there about the calming center and stuff like that?
The calming center is new, but yes, we have a little section on, kids, even being like a pet parent, how to act with your partner, how to act at work. There's a whole chapter on, applying mindfulness in the everyday. So I think that's the biggest thing. People think it's kind of this like hot and sexy term right now, but what does that actually mean? How do you actually implement it? And so Kate, my co-author, and I, we both worked in corporate. And so we wrote the book with a very practical mind of, how do you implement? Every tip is a different way you can implement mindfulness or meditation in your day-to-day life.
Yeah, I think that's fantastic. I like that approach. Definitely gonna recommend the book to people I know, because a lot of times I'll hear from people say in passing, I meditate. Do you? But nobody. I'll say, I picture the sign on my forehead's flashing that says I'm confused. I mean, I'm confused. So teach me how, which I think is a great thing in the book. What industry did you work in sales and marketing? I was just curious.
CPG, so consumer packaged goods.
Wow.
So I worked at AC Nielsen. I started out my career at AC Nielsen. Then I did my summers at Kraft, and most of my majority of my career was at Cadbury, which was now Mondelez. But that's where I spent the majority of my career.
That's amazing. I can see, certainly when I look at your website and I look at how you've packaged yourself as a thought leader. Tell us about just the address for your website. We'll put it in the show notes. And what you've got some neat things on there, including I read masterclass and some tools. Tell us about all that.
Yeah, thank you. Anyone can check out my website, ninapurewal.com. And because I spent so long in corporate, I'm super passionate about going back into corporate and giving tips and tools on how to find that calm in that situation. So ninapurewal.com has everything that you need. There's also links to where you can find the book. But at the end of the day, my goal is to help people find an ounce of happiness or peace in their everyday, and also work through life adversities. So, that is it. That's my goal. And that's, hopefully what my website represents. I just had a burning desire. When I came back from the ashram and I went back in corporate, that's when it really hit me. I thought all of these tools and tips, even though they're so ancient, are so applicable in the real world. Like, people think, oh, you have to go to the mountains and live in India for a year and study. Yes. Okay. You need the foundation, but they're so applicable in everyday life. Like, I do workshops for companies now, and especially now because post-pandemic, everyone has been so incredibly stressed. And it's just the messaging is so relevant. So, that's my hope, is that people walk away with practical tools on how to find more calm and peace.
Yeah, I also see you as such a great teacher and a thought leader, because when somebody does something and it's from a deep purpose of, having to develop that knowledge to deal with their own life situation, I think you become real, especially when you tell your story. There are people at all people that teach mindfulness that haven't gone through trauma or tragedy. And I think it's amazing what you've done. The ashram, I'm curious about that. Somebody I know, because I want to do that, and somebody I know did it. They went to India, but that's a little bit much for me, even though my grandparents are from there.
Yeah.
Is there a cost to doing a program like that?
Yeah, there is usually a cost, especially if you're living on site. If you're living at the ashram, that you've got to pay for board and food. It's not
Yeah.
exorbitant by any means. It really depends on, I would say, find a teacher and a school or an organization that really works for you, that speaks to you. Do some research, maybe talk to people there, and you can do 10-day retreats. You could do 3-day retreats. Like you did
it for a year.
We did a year,
That's
a
amazing.
full year. It was absolutely, I always say it was the most enlightening experience, and it was also the most challenging. It was it was hard. I totally unplugged. So I had no access to,
Wow.
I used to be addicted to my BlackBerry or Crackberry, they called it at the time.
I had one of those.
Yeah. And 2-3 o'clock, this is when I was reporting into New York, and all times of the night I was, on email and totally unplugged. And it's interesting what happened that year, because I unplugged and didn't have any distractions with TV, friends, phone, apps, anything. Suddenly stuff from my childhood, from my dad and brother, came up, because I think I went full force into my career, exactly what you did, totally suppressed and repressed everything. I just focused 100% on my career, and I couldn't let anything go because I wasn't dealing with anything.
Exactly.
And that's been the pandemic for a lot of people too, because we've been so isolated, stuff's coming up. It was just hard at first, but once you kind of start to move through it, it's the most empowering and rewarding thing.
Yeah, I was thinking when you were talking about other people and having bad experiences or traumatic experiences, that I always used to think there was something wrong with me coming from a traumatic childhood. But some research I've looked at says that about 80, if you listen to people like Oprah Winfrey, 90% of the world have some form of trauma in the past.
Yeah, I'm actually reading her book right now. What Happened to You?
Amazing.
It's so synchronistic, but it's incredible.
Yeah, so I had this crazy thought, like, okay, so we are the majority, 80 to 90%. So why do we think there's something wrong with us? The fact is, where I worked at the exec C level of business, it was taboo. You didn't talk about your weakness. You didn't show vulnerability. We were taught by our fathers to be tough and strong, and our board of directors and people, they think there's something wrong with him and he can't do that. I mean, it's just such BS, because the people who can do what you and I do, it show a bit of vulnerability. And that doesn't mean throwing up and crying. It means just telling a story with an impact, and then taking people in a different place to be happier. You become more real as a leader, and you can follow somebody like that. So that's why I'm following you now, because you're such a great mentor and experience. The going from the ashram, so 1 year in an ashram, that's incredible. Something else came to my mind when you talked about that, which relates back to my story. That I said this in my recent talk I did, TED Talk. I said that I was a self-worth chaser, not a success chaser.
Yes.
So in other words,
I love that line.
Thank you. I climbed the ladder fast. Manager 21, CEO 31. And, I'm not being ego here. My ego's gone. I have complete humility about what I did wrong and what I did well. But I was really searching for the love and acceptance of my father, which I never got. I only got that from when I did something well. What's interesting is, before, this will probably be in the next bit of work I do with the book, that before my dad passed away, God gave me a message, and I went and reconnected with him for a coffee. And that was in the fall of 2017. And we agreed to meet once a month starting that next January. And then, the phone rings. It's my mom saying, your dad's died. But when I met with my dad, everything fell away. There was forgiveness. I didn't forgive his bad behavior. I was like the black and blue kid. But here's the thing. I asked my dad, I said, tell me about your childhood. And I didn't know my grandfather, but my grandfather was just like him, a brutal guy, drunk. My dad was very much treated poorly. I think that behind a lot of addictions is a mental health crisis.
Absolutely. 100%.
And what's interesting is, I learned from my dad, after 10 years not seeing him, that he was going into prisons. He was doing meditation for men's groups. All the things you're talking about, my dad became this hero And at his funeral, people lined up, 100 people, I didn't know them. And they said, your dad, he was a pillar in the community. He helped us. He helped me and my daughter survive. And I'm going like, you talking about the same father I know? Because he was a villain. I hated him.
Yeah.
And so without getting into the painful side of your story again, did your dad have a childhood that was something different? I mean, to do what he did is
Yeah.
unthinkable, but was there something behind that?
Yeah, you know, Tom, I have spent decades trying to piece together his childhood, because I talk about my forgiveness journey with my dad in the book. And it's really important to know that it's not forgiving or excusing or righting the wrongs, because they are still wrong.
Yeah.
It's about forgiving so you can have
releasing
freedom, so
yourself,
releasing yourself from all the anger that you're holding on to. But, you know, I realized I was holding on to so much anger and sadness and sorrow, and, you know, it'd been 20 years since the incident, and he's dead and gone. He's not being impacted by my feelings. So yeah, I lost touch with a lot of his family after that. But, you know, I have been trying to piece together his childhood, and he had great parents. Like, my grandparents helped raise us, but I think my grandfather was United Nations, was in the United Nations, and he studied a lot and he worked a lot. So I think my dad just never got any attention. He had a little brother who got all of the attention. But I definitely think he struggled with mental health. He struggled with depression. And back then in the 90s, men, they wouldn't get, you know, you had to really have a clinical issue to have a psychologist or a psychiatrist.
That's right.
He went with undiagnosed mental health issues, untreated. And that's why I'm so passionate about speaking out about it now, because, you know, if you get the help, your whole life can change. Your lives of your children, your parents, everybody around you can change, you know, if you just get the help. And he never did. And everything exploded. Everything completely exploded.
Yeah, I can't wait to read that part of the book, the healing, that forgiveness journey. I want to put my hands together and say I honor you for taking that step, because it took me most of my life, sadly, until like 3 years ago, to take that step with my own father. And it's a huge step to free yourself, and that's amazing to me. You know, it's funny, I was thinking about psychotropic drugs, just from my own experience with the depression from my concussion. Some of the side effects of these cocktails they put you on are pretty amazing. Like, you can be on the wrong mix of drugs, or you can just say, I'm not taking it, and come off it, and you can have suicidal thoughts. You can do more harm. So it's really important, I think, for people to learn from what you're teaching us, to learn that there's more to managing mental health than just pills, but things like mindfulness and meditation and all the things in your book. I mean, the self-care, that's what I learned. It's in the old days, I'm sure if my dad was diagnosed, they would have given him pills for anxiety and things like that. And, you know, maybe he didn't look after himself. He didn't do all the other things. So can't wait to get deeper into that book. As we go to wrap up here, I'm just going to ask you a fun question. Well, I think it's fun. We'll see what you think. That when you're done with this world, well, let me first share that there's a Canadian study that was done, and they asked 90-year-olds, what are your top 3 regrets? And all the data came in, no order of importance. 1 was, I didn't risk enough. 2 was, I didn't reflect enough. And 3 was, I didn't leave a legacy. And so with all the things you're doing, the founder of Pure Minds, your wellness, your master class, your book, the teachings, what do you want this world to look like when you're done with it?
It's a great question. It's such a big one. And I guess it is a fun one. I definitely would say I would want people to know that they have everything within them to be a warrior, to be peaceful, to be happy. No one can choose that happiness for you. Only you can set yourself, you know, on that path. And there is hope, you know, through challenges, through adversity, through loss, through grief, through trauma. There's hope if you put in the work that, you know, you can find that peace. And it's also important, I think, to follow your heart. Like, I love what you do. I love how you had the courage to leave, you know, C-suite opportunities. And I had a monk tell me once, and this was kind of a game changer when I was at the ashram. He said, you know, as long as you're walking a path that is not meant for you, you're going to feel like you're walking with a rock in your shoe.
That's interesting. I love that.
That uncomfortable little, so my hope is that everybody does what they love, truly does what they love, and knows that through that there's so much kind of peace and empowerment coming out of it.
That's amazing. Everybody, let's honor Nina. That's a teaching moment. Don't walk with that rock in your shoe. Find that comfort. Find what you love to do with that purpose of that you probably haven't figured out yet. And I love your vision of what you're trying to do with this world. It's greatly needed. And I want to say this with a lot of love and respect for you. I love you and your story, that I know, because you put on a brave face, that people like us, every day we wake up, it's a challenge. We have to keep moving forward. That I know that each Father's Day, or as your daughter grows and wants to know about grandpa and grandma, that there's going to be new journeys for you to be able to explain, or however you deal with that. And I know that God's given you the grace and the equipped you with what you have to not only do that for your tribe, but to go out in the world and help the millions who are going to go through the same journey. I mean, it's just amazing to me that you're here teaching us. So I want to honor you. So I'm going to close the interview with a few awards and prizes, especially for you. I write these down on all my shows when I'm writing on my paper here. People can't see it if they're on the podcast listening. These are what I call leadership words. And so the first one is hero. You're a hero. And number 2 is wisdom. My goodness, the things you know and what you've done and experienced and what you've learned. 3 is courage, absolute courage. And 4 is love. It comes out of you when you speak. And for a woman who's gone through what you have, to be able to smile and project that, I think they say what I believe anyways, if you wake up in the morning and can feel love for yourself, you can love others, and you do it really well. And we're going to give you an award today. So I don't know if you know about this, but when I created the show, I wanted to have a symbol of the show so that each of the Quiet Warriors would go and leave the show and commit to continuing their life work and making an impact with their story on the world. Behind me, you can see something on my screen if I full screen it now for those who are watching the video later. And that is called a challenge coin. Now, challenge coins, they started in World War II. And this one is hand painted and crafted. The back of it is actually the hero's journey narrative, step by step. Wow. And these soldiers would carry them and commit to each other. If they would have fun, if one didn't have their coin in their pocket, maybe they'd buy a drink and dinner. But they're used today around the world to create community. They're used, all first responders, even Alcoholics Anonymous had their own version of a challenge coin. I created these coins so that you would be connected to all the other Quiet Warriors who have come on the show. Less than 50 a year are given out on a planet of 8 billion, and they're not easy to get. And so welcome to the Quiet Warrior tribe.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I'm so appreciative of being part of this incredible tribe that is filled with heroes and people of courage and people who are willing to be vulnerable enough to share their story, which is not always easy. So thank you. I'm so honored.
Oh, you're welcome. And I'd like to, with your permission, dedicate this show to, as you wish, perhaps to your brother or whatever, make a special dedication. And I've just written down on my paper ×2, I'll be sending 2 coins, one so you can honor your brother who paid the ultimate price, but he obviously had an impact on you. And I'd say that he would be an unsung hero, not to take anything away from your mom either.
Yes, 100, both of them. Like, honestly, my mom is the one who really got me on this spiritual. I always say she's my number 1 teacher and the one who, she really saved me. She was just an inspiration. So her and them both.
Okay, well.
And my dad has taught me too. I've learned to put my ego aside on that and my pain and realize that, sometimes I do say, if my dad hadn't done what he did, I wouldn't be on this path, so there's gratitude on many levels for many things, but I'm so appreciative. Thank you so much.
We'll find a way to figure out how we're going to honor everybody there. And every time you say something, I just want to keep talking to you, but that's exactly what people ask me now. I'll say outwardly, I love my dad. And people who know the story will say, how could you say that? And it's all back to what you've taught us. I've changed the meaning in my brain of what my dad did to something positive, something that keeps me going. And that is making an impact, helping other people. So congratulations. We'll give you the last word. Hold the book up again, plug it, tell people again where to get a hold of you.
So this is Let That Shit Go. It's got 120 tips on how to find more peace and happiness in the everyday. And you can get a hold of me through my website, ninapurewal.com, or you can follow me on Instagram at nina.pure.minds. I would love to connect with you. If you have any questions, feel free to reach out. I'm happy to answer them. And I wish you all the best of luck on your mindfulness and life journeys.
Fantastic. Well, everybody live that life with passion and purpose, like you hear from Nina PUREWAL here, and live the life that you deserve and desire. Thank you, Nina.
Thank you so much, Tom. Such an honor to speak with you.
You're welcome.